Welcome to the Once Upon a Sunday Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts, Josh Kimmel, Dave Campbell, and Justin Bowerly.
Football Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. Today we have a jam-packed show, awesome show. If you like tight ends, this is the show for you because we are talking nothing but the tight end position today. Now, how are we going to get there? Listen, we have a guest. We have two co-hosts today. That's right. One of them showed up. I don't know if he's going to be here actually active, but Dave did show up today. So without further ado, let's introduce my co-host, Justin Bowerly, Dave Campbell. What is going, Dave? Look, what's up? What's going on, man?
When you talk shit about me, you know what that does to me. You know I'm gonna act out when you start talking shit. So
hey, PG show, Dave.
We are. You start dropping F-bombs like you did 2 weeks ago.
No, that was in the past. We are now in the present. And we are talking tight ends. But before we get anywhere, guys, how are we doing this week? It's been a while, Dave. It's been a while since we've seen you. Is there anything? Am I on the clock right now? Because you started a draft today that I had no idea you started.
Yep. You're welcome. You're welcome. Everyone paid me. I told you that's what we were starting with. Everyone pays me.
There's a new guy in the league. I don't even know who he is.
In what league?
Basic. Who is that guy?
Who are you talking about?
It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. Literally nobody listening cares.
I don't know who you're talking about. There's nobody new. Everybody's the same.
Maybe because of Sleeper. We switched over to MFL to Sleeper. Maybe I don't know this guy's Sleeper name.
Oh, maybe.
Justin, how are we doing, man?
I'm doing great. I just got a trade offer from producer Jacob, and I got to tell you, it's pretty bad.
You don't want to hear it. I got an offer from him too. I just got
That's a whole sub show. That's a whole other show between just me and Dave. Because we're keeping tabs on all you guys. We're taking notes.
I don't send you guys trade offers for a reason. So, but no, this one from Jacob, I'm not loving right now. It's in Cut the Meat too, so cut that meat.
Oh, I got one in Cut the Meat too.
From Jacob?
Yeah.
He don't send me offers no more. Unfortunately, but we love you, Jacob, if you're watching wherever you are. Hey, let's stop the nonsense. Let's get our plugs in real quick before we get our guest in. Make sure you follow us everywhere on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it these days, TikToks, Instagrams at OUSFFPod. Make sure you go to our website, OUSFFpod.com, where you can sign up for Super League. Justin's been talking about this video promotion he's going to make, but we don't need it because he's going to do a live read right now. Justin, how do we enter Super League?
I actually have a video for it.
No way.
I do. Well, kind of. So Best Ball League, it's a charity Best Ball League. All of funds are going to the Children's Miracle Network through a program called Extra Life, which I have a video that I'm going to premiere here. It's 30 seconds. Here you go.
Oh, hi there. Time for Extra Life again? Wait, what is Extra Life? Seriously? Extra Life is a charity gaming fundraiser. We play games to raise money for local children's hospitals. Extra Lifers around the world have raised more than $100 million since 2008, and all because of people like you. So what are you waiting for? Donate to Extra Life to help kids like me.
And if all of you guys could pay us money, that child actor was really expensive to get in that commercial. So no, but all seriousness, it's a cool foundation. It's a cool program. Like the video said, it's gamers that are raising money for kids, and we're all technically gamers because we play a game called fantasy football. So join the league. You can register at OUSFFpod.com, and then just click the Super League tag at the top to register.
That sounds great. Before we get into it, let's introduce our guest, Seth Keller. Seth is from the data guy at Face Off Sports Network. Seth, what is going on? You just told me your kids are still in school, by the way. Off topic. I'm blown by that.
Yeah, no. That is life in New York. If the taxes don't get you, then having, the school year run from basically September 1st to the end of June, that'll get you. So both my wife and I are in education and my kids are in education. So we will be trudging along all the way until June 24th, which,
That's awesome. Let me ask you something about New York, because I've never been there. To me, it's a whole new world that I would probably never experience. I want to. What's up with the water? Why is it so good? It's all I hear down here in Tampa and Florida. It's all our pizza's better because of water. You know, we get a lot of transplants. It's water. What's up? Why is your water so good?
It's the aqueducts. So it's the only thing that was built in New York City that was built to sustain the scalability of New York City. Everything else in New York City has it is built for something 10 years ago and is already too small by the time construction finishes on it. And so the aqueducts were built to be able to, one, they still use awesome technology from ancient Rome, which I was also super fascinating. I'm a social studies teacher. All right. Lots of history, fun facts, but they still use all sorts of ancient stuff from back then to actually move water from all these places upstate and whatnot. And it just comes all the way through these aqueducts to get into the city. And so the public tap water in New York City is actually really good quality water. And to the most part, you don't need to do bottled water too much. It's not like you're going to get, beaver fever if you're living out in the country and have ever experienced that where, you're getting your water from a lake or something like that. It's, you're not going to get all those types of diseases and stuff like that. So it's tasty, and pizza is best in New York. It's just a thing.
I can't wait. One day.
Yeah. Scott Fishbowl live draft is happening in New York. If you need another reason to get up there, I got my Scott Fishbowl shirt on already. I got my early release shirt. I'm ready for it. So what better reason to make a trip to New York than to come draft?
I think we're all in live drafts this year, except for one person on the show. I won't name him. He knows who he is. He didn't register, this guy. He was in. He would have had a spot. Dave thought he registered for the Orlando draft. He's done it since the first Orlando, so have I. This is the first year he didn't get in. I'm so upset. But,
I love to say that you're not going to name
me out
them
yet.
and then say it in the middle of the description of it. I'm not going to name Dave, Dave is the guy that didn't get it, but I'm not going to name Dave by name.
I'm like, Dave, did you get your invite yet? Make sure you go. We know, come on, what are you doing? He's like, yeah, bro, I'm in. I'm going to get in.
We only reminded him several times.
It's not
fine.
over yet. I got a DM from somebody, so we'll see.
There's still lots of space left. If anybody's out there trying to get into Scott Fishbowl, it's a phenomenal time, and there's still lots of spots open. So Dave, here's fingers crossed that you get in there.
If not, I'm just gonna go to the live draft with Josh and draft his team for him because he's not good enough.
Whoa, uncool, Dave.
One of you guys made it to the playoffs last year, right?
Dude, I've never made the playoffs.
I don't remember.
Oh, so it was Dave. Okay. I made it to round 2.
I think I barely made it, and then I think I lost in the first round.
Seth, how are you in the playoffs?
2 years ago or 3 years ago, I was in the top 50, I think, and then the year before that, I was in the top 100, and then the 2 most recent years, it was either last year or the year before that, missed the playoffs by the skin of my teeth both times. The live draft, we had a ton of fun, probably had a little too much fun. Me and my captain became best friends by the time we actually got done with the ride. I ended up taking Roschon Johnson as my last pick of the live draft in the 10th round. And it was that's it. I'm stomping it, putting it in place. Roschon Johnson's going to be the man. He wasn't.
He was not.
I survived with Justin Fields, Jonathan Taylor, and Derrick Henry as my first 3 picks and made it to the second round of the playoffs. So anything can happen. I also got about 7 rounds to the draft before I realized it wasn't a best ball league. So
first timer last year. I remember that. You're like, it's fun.
I was like, this is best ball, right? And they're like,
no.
So Scott Fishbowl's fun. If you haven't signed up yet, make sure you do that. I drafted Travis Kelce 101 last year. That is something I will not be doing, which we will be talking about tight ends and where to draft them coming up in either Scott Fishbowl or your redraft leagues, or maybe you're doing a startup dynasty. So Seth, let's get right into it. First, I want to know, without telling your age, how long you've been playing fantasy football? Has it been have you been to the newspaper ages like Dave has been, or are you kind of like newer?
I haven't gotten that far back. My first league was in 2003. So there was, I believe it was on NFL.com was the first one. And that was in 2003. So I've been playing for about 21 years. And then like really started picking up around like 2010, and then started doing content creation when I was staying home with my kids, hence the Twitter name FF, the at-home dad, because I was at home with my kids, and from about 6 months to a year, they were still like primo nappers. So they were giving me about 4 hours in the day of like, well, I did the dishes, I did the laundry, like I cleaned up all of their stuff, and I still got time left over. Let's see. Let me start diving into some more fantasy stuff. And so that was, that was when my kids were 6 months old, and my kids will be turning 8 in a month. So about 7 years of this fantasy football content creation type of life. So, yeah.
Right on. So, the show is labeled around tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw this on the sheet, because spoiler, I don't make the sheets or do the scheduling. That's all Justin. By the way, Justin, thank you so much for all of that. Just want to just give you your flowers on air. I'm like, the hell are we going to do? Talk about tight ends for like an hour. How are we going to do this? So, and why did you pick this show? I'm just so curious, because Dave's laughing because Dave was like, guys, I'm not sitting here talking about tight ends for an hour. But why did you sign up for this, or why did you request this spot for the tight ends?
Well, because I originally was like, hey, Justin, here's a great idea. Let me come in and rant about median points per game. And he was like, but I have this schedule. And I was like, okay, well, let me pick one from the schedule then.
I forgot that's how you got scheduled.
Yeah.
I would much rather talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick.
Who
let Justin in charge? That's what I want.
Be ready, because that's a whole
June
nother
12th,
thing.
Dave.
Yeah.
June 12th.
But yeah,
the best show ever.
Yeah, I mean, I love jumping into data and strategy, right? And tight end premium leagues are one of those types of leagues where it just adds that little wrinkle to the strategy, and it creates these opportunities to take advantage of the situation, right? And I love doing that stuff. That's why I get so excited for Scott Fish Bowl. That's why I get excited for a lot of the charity leagues that put some kind of twist on the rules, on the setup. I played in one league. It was oh goodness, what was the no arm super flex. So it was I think it was 8 positions. They were all flex positions, but you couldn't play a single quarterback. So it was like the no arms aspect of it, and just every position was a flex position. So like, how do you take advantage of those kind of unique things? I just love doing that type of stuff. So when it was like, all right, tight end premium, it's one of those type of leagues where it's just enough outside of the norm where it's worth discussing those kind of interesting caveats to it, but it's close enough to the norm where you can kind of convince people like, hey, let's try a tight end premium league. It's a little bit easier than like, hey, let's try a guillotine league. Let's try a zombie league. Let's try a vampire league, which all, kind of morbid, league type names, but all super fun. And so that's why I was like, all right, tight end premium, that's the one we'll go with. And plus it gave me an opportunity. I have a database that I'm working on that currently has over 101,000 lines of individual weekly entries since 2010. So I'm actually going to be referencing some of that data as we jump into different tight end stuff. So I was like, this is another prime opportunity for me to get into that data, play around with it, and come out with some kind of actionable, actionable takeaway.
Oh man. 1,001. Dave, let me get to you real quick because you are, and this is nothing against you, Dave, or nothing against you, Seth. If you're the total opposite when it comes to fantasy, as you're just like, get the studs. I don't care what the rules are. Just get the studs, and they're going to perform, and you're going to do well. Like, that's worked out for you, though. Like, you're honestly the best fantasy player I've ever played with. I said that out loud. I've said that everywhere I've ever said. What do you think about that? Like, the in-depth conversation, or like looking at all these statistics? Are you still like, it doesn't matter if it's tight end premium, it don't matter if it's no tight, it doesn't matter, just pick the best player available?
Well, always pick the best player available, but that best player available might be a tight end higher than you think it is. I mean, that dumbass league that we joined that Justin made with 2 points per PR for tight ends. And think about how high the tight ends went for. McBride and those guys and Laporta went for like, they were some of the highest paid players. And then we even looked at the stats and saw that Evan Ingram was the number overall 7 player in that league last year with those settings. So you just got to take advantage of what's in front of you, and that's a huge advantage. And compared to regular, if it was one tight end or regular, 1 point like normal, that would not be the case. And you just got to adapt to whatever the leagues you're in.
Just couldn't imagine paying that much money for Evan Ingram in a dynasty startup.
He got him for $7.
Oh, you got him for 7? I thought he went for more than that.
11.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Who went for bonkers money? Wasn't it McBride?
Laporta was 80. McBride was like 76, and there was one other guy who was 70 something too.
What was the budget?
400.
Yeah.
What did like
26 roster
for
spots?
John? What did those type of guys go? Like CeeDee Lamb. Just curious. What did
CD
those
and
type of
Chase
guys
went for
go
like 95, 96. The
JJ
top
100.
quarterbacks went for 100. Caleb Williams and Mahomes. So those tight ends were, I mean, right after those elite receivers, who was the next highest paid receiver after? Because I know you paid a ton for Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I paid a ton
and
for
I paid for
Amon-Ra.
Chase.
I
CeeDee
paid
Lamb.
for
Those guys all
Marvin.
went. Those like top 4 or 5 guys were like $90-something, and then there was a drop off to the next like receiver that I can think of. I don't even know who the next highest receiver was.
AJ Brown probably.
But he went for like 42. He went way too cheap. Way too cheap. I don't know how you guys let freaking sweep.
You know what happened, Seth? This is not to break down this entire league, but somebody threw out Anthony Richardson like really early, and there's a bunch of Colts fans. He went for like $100 bajillion. He was the highest. He was the highest paid player.
Yep.
And then
So that's a quick takeaway. That right there is one of the most important things I find when doing any type of league is you have to take the time to figure out who you're playing with, because regardless of rules and stuff like that, which know your rules, know when the draft's going to start. That's that's a good one. But also know who you're playing with, because you can take advantage of things like, is a guy like Anthony Richardson going to go crazy high because they're Colts fans, or because they're people that just really believe in the Konami code type of quarterbacks where, maybe I'll get a huge steal on and pair like Goff and Stafford or something like that. For, the two of them combined are going to be cheaper than Anthony Richardson, which, judging by the type of intro you just gave to it, it sounds like somebody probably did get a bit of a steal with some of those, middle, I would say late end QB1 into QB2 spots, and probably going to turn out not too bad for those type of teams, depending on what else they do. But knowing who you're playing with is a huge, huge advantage. And you can take that and take advantage of it in numerous different ways.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I knew he was going to go for bonkers money. I told Dave that on 2 days before the draft. I'm like, I'm putting out Richardson first. He's going to go for like $1 bajillion. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. I didn't put him out. I ended up putting someone else out. But
top 5 guys were Richardson 110, Jefferson 102, Mahomes 101, Caleb 100, and Amon-Ra 97.
I got 2 of the top 5 guys. Let's go.
You did.
Oh,
I
you
had
had no
2 of the
money
top
left,
10.
I had no money
That's
left.
why you had no money left.
Hey, but my listen, would you be happy with this core? I don't want to toot my own horn, but Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, CJ Stroud, Lamar Jackson. That's all you got.
and then a bunch of $1 players.
Hey, I got some good players.
I mean, it's I'm assuming Superflex Dynasty or Redraft.
Dynasty.
With
I
Debbie.
mean, honestly, it's a really with Debbie too. It's a really solid. Like those 4 guys are really solid. It really depends on the guys that you spend $1 on. Are they going to hit soon enough for you to be able to capitalize on the guys that you have? You have a pretty young, ready to run core, so I don't mind it. But without seeing like, who's your running backs, who's your tight end,
I can tell you.
Ask him that.
I can tell you. Hold on.
Don't ask for those ones.
Zeke, we got Zeke over here, baby. We got Pollard for like $2. We got Pat Frymuth for like $1. That was a steal. That was a steal.
That was a good price. I wanted him so bad for $1.
I got T. Higgins for like $14. What?
That's
I
right.
got Jaden Reed for like $6. I mean, come on, man.
That was a great deal. I was so mad.
I mean, I'll be rooting for Zeke once again.
Yes.
With my little Cowboys thing here. I got Keenan Allen with my Cowboys banner hanging on top of it. Like, I'm really hoping that Zeke can, ignite a little bit of magic from 4 years ago. Not too realistically expecting it, but high hopes. So you're probably going to have to be in a similar boat with both Zeke and Pollard, even though Pollard's on a new team now. But it's going to be an interesting group there. It'll be interesting to see what you do with the waiver wire once the season really starts kicking off. So
I hope it does well. But anyway, speaking of drafts, let's get right into it, the in-depth part of it. Let's go redraft. So when you do play tight end premium, I know there's different types, half point, full point. Some people are crazy enough to do a whole 2 point per reception for tight ends, which is probably the most fair, balanced tight end premium that you like to play.
So that's honestly the biggest question that I think people keep asking of trying to make it fair. And the fact of the matter is like, when you really dive into the data, like tight ends are just one, such a volatile position, and two, their points are so top heavy to the top guys that if you make it like +2, your crappy tight ends are still crappy tight ends. And that's basic. And no offense to the actual players, this is like, fantasy wise, right? Your crappy fantasy tight ends, even if you make it +2 receptions per reception, they're still going to be crappy fantasy tight ends. It's just those elite guys now jump into a new stratosphere with the other elite people. Like you now take a guy like Evan Ingram, right? Who had, I don't have it up next to me anymore, but he had 117 targets last year. I was just looking at it earlier. I'm not that good.
Yeah.
No, he had 143 targets, I think. He had
143 targets, but 100
receptions. Yeah.
So like if you take that and you go, all right, well, we'll +2 that, he now jumps into like a 400 fantasy point, type of guy, rivaling like a CeeDee Lamb type of, really setting the mark. But you look at the rest of the guys who, to be a top 12 tight end over the past like 3 years, you needed like 60 receptions. Even if you multiply that times 2, that's still +120. They're probably at like 120, 100 already. You add 120 to it. Yeah, that bumps them up pretty significantly, but you're still not like, you're still getting a relatively crappy tight end, especially when you're looking at the whole wide picture of tight ends. And so I say all that to say, I am for the kind of like, give them an extra point per reception, right? And when you do that, it gets enough of an increase there where they can still be competitive with some other receivers, running backs, things like that. Because otherwise, when you're looking at your tight end 12s, to be a tight end 12 in any given week, you're looking at roughly a 10 PPR like standard PPR, you're looking at like 10 fantasy points. And most of the time, that's because they scored a touchdown. So 60% of the time, your tight end 1 has scored a touchdown. Most of the receptions, most of the time, they're getting around 4 receptions. So even if you multiply that times 2, you're still only getting you're getting 4 more points than a normal PPR type of league, which still puts them at below like a wide receiver 2. So that's where I'm saying, like, if you give do PPR and then give them an extra +1 to it, now it takes your tight end 12 and makes them at least comparable to like that wide receiver 2 on any given week. And I do thresholds for that rather than like counting, well, this guy was 12 this week, but in another week, they may be something else. CJ Stroud is a prime example. CJ Stroud scored the exact same score 2 weeks last season. In 1 week, he was like the QB 10. In the other week, he was like the QB 14. So same exact number of fantasy points, but just because of what other people were doing in that given week, it's a QB 10 performance, and the other one's outside of the QB 1, right? So what I do is I always look at thresholds to say, like, yeah, 1 week, there may be 13, 14 guys above that mark, but on another week, it'll even itself out because there'll only be 10. And so looking over a long time period, that's where I get my kind of like, this is a typical score for a week. So tons of information just spewed out there. But mostly +1, I would say, because that makes your tight ends at least somewhat comparable to wide receiver 2/3-ish guys. You can kind of start making flex choices if you have a guy that you think is going to put up tight end 1 numbers.
Any rebuttal from Josh and Dave, who thinks the league is really stupid for having that same point?
Hey, I never said it was stupid. I never said it was stupid. I play in all kinds of leagues, and I work around it, and I just don't like. You like it, Seth? That's fine. I prefer just a slight bump just to keep them in their place.
I agree. I'm sorry. Any scoring system that has Evan Ingram as the 7th best overall player is not correct. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
We all know Evan Ingram is just the best tight end.
And I love Evan Ingram.
All of last year.
Me and you were probably the biggest 2 like Evan Ingram fans.
Ingram, like
I love
truthers.
him. But that's outrageous that he's the 7th best overall player. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
And
it was pretty insane.
And my one little caveat to that is like, yes, but if you take that like tight end premium piece out, right? The next best tight end you get in a standard PPR league, I want to say Evan Ingram was what, 30th or something like that. I can pull it up relatively quickly, but I want to say like yes, that jump is massive, but it at least puts like your elite wide receiver 1 is in that top 12 mark. Your elite running back 1 is in that top 12 mark. Usually your quarterbacks round out a lot of the rest of it, depending on, league scoring and whatnot. Why not get the number 1 tight end of the season into that mark? And granted, I think a little bit of that was Evan Ingram just had a really good season last season, especially with that number of receptions. But I do agree, seeing Evan Ingram jump into like that high, you're kind of like something seems wrong.
Dave, I only created this point system so that Evan Ingram is a very, very good player, and I could be justified by me saying Evan Ingram is just the best.
He was up there last year. We don't need the extra. It's all good.
And I hate the Jaguars, but I hate how much I like Evan Ingram.
I'm starting a new league, and I'm gonna make the rule so it makes T. Higgins the number 7 player because he's my favorite player. And like the guy,
never even gonna be top 7 wide receiver. That's not possible. Sorry.
Most points for guys who gets hurt every year and doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
and
then he might.
Yes. over and over and over. Hey, there ain't a dynasty team that I don't have T. Higgins on. I'll just say that I'm the biggest T. Higgins guy, but you know what? I am what I am. Now, we are going into draft season. Redraft season is coming up. I like to start redraft season around Scott Fishbowl time because that's where it really, really, really ramps up. So who are we targeting this year? Like specifically, I know we just spoke about Evan Ingram, but is there anyone else that isn't so obvious that you think is going to get a lot of targets, a lot of play in the next season coming up?
I mean, if we're doing redraft, you have to keep going with Kelsey. I feel like Kelsey is my new Brady rule. And that is, as much as I'm ready for the wheels to fall off, and I'm like I'm anxious that it's going to happen as soon as I draft him, as long as he's suiting up, you're going to draft him, you're going to play him. The offense in Kansas City is just too good to not try and take advantage of that, and just always kind of know in the back of your mind, if the wheels do fall off, what's my pivot? I don't need to handcuff a tight end. I'm not suggesting that. Please don't go out and handcuff tight ends. But it's thinking like, where is your pivot? Like if it's being ready to scoop somebody up off the waiver wire, it's having some of those backup guys that you're ready for, because Kelsey is getting up there in age. If you start to see that drop off, just the way football works, usually once that decline starts happening, there's not a bounce back from it, especially once guys start hitting, especially your skilled positions. Once they start getting into that 30 plus age bracket, that's when you can start to really see that downward slide for their points.
I agree. Justin, you're a big Travis Kelce hater. Last year, you talked all about how he's awful. He's going to retire. He's not good anymore. But he did lead the league in points per game.
I said he wasn't going to finish as tight end 1 last season. That's all I said.
Oh, you were so right.
I think he should retire soon. But
I think, wasn't he tight end 1 in points per game though?
Yes, he was.
So he was tight end 1.
Is that how we're judging people nowadays, Dave? Yeah. I mean, we
all have a game. Somebody used to tell me that this is a weekly game.
I used to tell you that, but then I've been old and bitter, and I don't think like that anymore. No, I do. It's just he was so frustrating last year, but I get it.
Was he? He was frustrating because you expected 2-3 years ago.
I was going to say that.
That's why. If you put him with the rest of the tight ends, he was great. He was literally a tight end 1 in points per game. So he did everything you wanted.
Technically, actually,
you just took him too high. That you wanted the 1,300 yards and the touchdowns. That's what you wanted.
And it happens every year though. Like we want that from Stroud this year, and most likely odds are it's not going to repeat. We wanted that with Mahomes after he threw fit, but didn't repeat. Lamar, same thing, didn't repeat. Like it's hard to repeat those especially Kelsey did it for so long and is still doing it. Yes, we expect it, but it's so, even the Debo year when he went bananas rushing it, it didn't happen. So, it's a big drop off. I'm expecting that with some of these players that I want to get into later. For all you guys that are watching, we have 44 of you watching right now through X, YouTube, wherever you're watching. Thank you so much. This is OUS Fantasy. We are talking tight end premium. We have a special guest, Seth Geller of the Data Guy at Face Off Sports Network. So if you are here, leave a like, subscribe if you're here, if you're new. If you're here for Seth, do me a favor, just hit that like button. His kids are still in school, guys. Like drop a like for us. Anyway, guys that may fall off, I'm not saying they will, but if they do, who's the prime target? Maybe a Trey McBride, maybe a Sam Laporta. I'm not saying they will, but can you give me an example?
So perfect segue right from what you were talking about with expectations, right? One of the things that I've found over years and years of playing fantasy football is as soon as you have that year 1 guy that pops, the very next year, everybody's ready to skyrocket them into the top 6, the top 12. And then the worst thing that can happen is the expectations get so large that it's almost impossible for them to be able to reach that mark. What that does do is that creates a third year buying opportunity, because people aren't necessarily upset with the performance, because when you look at the stats, you're like, the guy still had a pretty decent year, but it's in comparison to the expectation. So it's like, well, they let me down. Now it becomes a personal bias of like, I remember the letdown on the week-to-week basis that this guy that I drafted to get me 20 points a week, and they only got me 11, which again, 11 is still like a tight end one type of number. It's just not the tight end one type of number. So for me, Sam Laporta becomes one of these guys, and this is not a don't draft Sam Laporta message. This is a wait for the value for Sam Laporta. Do not draft Sam Laporta at the expectation. If you're in a league and people are drafting at expectation, be okay with that. Let that go. Be okay with that. And if somebody, if Sam Laporta hits and it's amazing, it'll be a tough pill to swallow, but it'll be a much worse pill, and it'll cause more lasting kind of, I want to say like psychological damage, because that makes it sound way too traumatic, but there is a little bit of that like emotional baggage that you carry with you when you have a guy that you draft super high in year 2, because you're just expecting the world of them, and then they don't live up to it, and you almost feel like that this disappointed, like almost like a disappointed dad type of moment where you're like, wow, son, you really let me down. And that's difficult to overcome in the next kind of draft cycle. So I would say, look out for Laporta, more so because of expectation, especially you mentioned around like Scott Fishbowl dynasty kind of drafts and stuff like that. If you get any of that carryover into redraft leagues, like if you have a late drafting dynasty league and an early drafting redraft league, and you kind of don't quite shift the mindset, I'm all for in dynasty league, hammer Sam Laporta. Go get that guy. In redraft, let him come to you.
Yeah, right now Sam Laporta is going in the 3rd round of PPR, regular PPR scoring, not even factoring in tight end premium here. Where do you find, like, what's the earliest you're going for a tight end, like in a tight end premium league?
So in a tight end premium league, I am aiming for the elite guys. I want a guy that's going to get 100 receptions. And last year there was only a handful of them, right? That 100 reception mark, that's what I'm aiming for. Because that's what's being multiplied, right? That's what you're getting the added bonus for. So I'm looking for my Travis Kelce's. I'm looking for Sam Laporta. I'm looking for Evan Ingram if I feel like he can repeat that. Looks like 100 something receptions. Who else was another guy that was pretty high up there? Hawkinson, not this year, just because of like the injury and whatnot, but trying to hit those elite guys.
Top 5 guys in receptions: Ingram with 114, Hawkinson 95, Kelce 93, Laporta 86, Njoku 81, McBride 81 also.
And I want to say all of them had over 100 targets in order to get to those reception totals.
Yeah, McBride had the least amount of targets with 106. Ferguson had 102 targets. Those are the only 7 players over 100 targets last year.
Yeah, so those are the guys I'm looking for. I'm looking for, and I misspoke earlier. I said 100 receptions. I meant 100 targets. If you get one of the guys that hits 100 receptions, that's your top 7 Evan Ingram moment right there. Yep. Good for you. But it's that 100 target mark. Get over that, and then if you get 60 plus receptions, you're in the top 12 tight end conversation. So I want to walk away with elite guys, or I want to wait till I get, I'm going to, depending on league size, roster size, bench size, things like that, I might wait and throw 2 darts at, Cole Kmet's probably moving up again. Like that, he was a guy last year that was like, I'll throw a dart late at Komet. I'll throw a dart late at this guy. I'll throw a dart late there. Fryermuth for $1, right? Like in a tight end premium league, he might move up a little bit, but I don't want to even in a tight end premium, I don't want to move up for that like crappy tier of tight end that we kind of, in that redraft mindset, those like mid-round, late-round tight ends, they just historically have a relatively bad track record. So I'd rather wait, take a couple shots, and hope that's the next guy. Or I'm really saying I have to get my guy early, and I'm going to make that move.
Yeah. So there, follow-up question here. We talk about the elite guys, and you want to get those guys early. We talked about this last year on this podcast about how like there's like 3 or 4 guys you go after in the first couple of rounds, and then there's a giant gap until like the next set of tight ends. What round do you think that set of tight ends is going to be this year? I mean, there's a lot of really good tight ends out there now, especially for fantasy football. Probably the most that we've seen in several years. Usually it's 3 guys and then a bunch of
I feel like there's a middle
not
tier
so
now.
great people. Yeah,
I feel like there's
actually
two
a middle
tiers. It's
tier.
like elite trash. Now it's elite, okay, trash. No offense to the trash. Like, you guys are awesome athletes.
So where are those
fantasy.
okay tight ends going then?
And
this is a question for anybody.
If it's like a 15 roster spot type of 15 round draft, like I'm taking those type of guys 10 or later. And if people are kind of overexposing themselves, even in like a tight end premium type of league, if you're using 2 roster spots on tight ends, again, if it's not those elite guys, you're not getting the same bang for your buck that you think you're getting if you get 2 wide receiver 3s or 2 wide receiver 2s, right? That's a much better deal for me. And so that's where I'm trying to invest in. I'm curious, Josh and Dave, what you guys would have said for that.
I was going to ask Dave, because Dave, you've been quiet. The fans want you, right? We're losing. Dave, I'm going to ask you about a specific player who could be in that elite tier.
Don't tell me.
Who has your favorite quarterback of all time, Kirk Cousins now. Where's Kyle Pitts? Where does he land in your eyes? Like, is he in that middle tier still, or is he kind of creeping up, or is he in this?
What sucks?
I want to know.
I gave up on him last year. I was like, I'm never drafting this guy again. And then my guy Kirk Cousins goes, and he reeled me back in. And now, like, I think he's gonna be a top 5 tight end. But I said the same thing last year. But I do think Cousins. I mean, I think I read that Pitts had the most, or he was in the top 3 or 5 uncatchable targets last year. Like, I know he was up there, and I'm just like, because his quarterbacks are awful. Cousins, whether you like him, you hate him, no matter what, he's an accurate quarterback. We saw what he did in Minnesota. He knows how to get the ball to elite players, and Pitts is a really good player. He's just had terrible coaching. So, they have all they have on offense. I mean, Bijan's a beast, and London's a good player. They have weapons, and I think Cousins can open up all 3 of those guys. I think the sky's the limit for all 3 of those players, and I think Pitts is. If he was a tight end 1 this year, would you guys be super, super surprised? I don't think we would. And that's the upside you got to think about when you're drafting these guys. If I can get Pitts as a tight end 5 or 6, and he has that tight end 1 upside, I mean, he can go for 1,000 yards. We know that. He can catch 80 balls. His rookie year, he had 1,000 yards. So it's not like this is something new. He's a great athlete. He's got a good quarterback. There's a chance that he's the tight end 1, and that's the guy. If you can get as like I said, as the 5th or 6th or 7th tight end off the board, that's the kind of upside you want when you're getting that guy.
I'm curious, Justin, you had the ADP up before. Do you still have it up? I'm curious what Pitts is actually going in. Dave was
I'm actually not sure right now either.
It's 7. I'm curious, like that's usually in that like 6 to 8 round of a draft also.
As of right now, Kyle Pitts is overall 61, which is the 5th round.
Fifth round.
He's
Man,
That's too high.
currently being
That
drafted
seems
tight
high.
end 6.
A little early.
That's
Tight end
too
six,
high.
I think
okay,
that's
so
early, yeah.
but is it if all the other tight ends are going?
Yeah, but I could sit back and take a Jake Ferguson later, who I do like, and if
You're right.
Pitts
You have
doesn't,
to make that decision.
yeah,
Mhm.
and you know, because I wonder who else is in that 5th round. Because I'm not gonna lie, redraft has been out of my mind this entire offseason. If you're looking at another player there, I hate to keep on
Looking
bringing
at
up like a T. Higgins
Kyle
or someone
Pitts,
else.
Evan Ingram, and George Kittle all in the 5th round.
No, I'm talking about like positional players though. Do you know the
Oh.
positional players?
Yeah, give me
Justin?
Yep.
Kittle. Don't start with me on Kittle. I can't sell that guy in any dynasty league. I can't get rid of this
So
guy.
surrounding Kyle Pitts, you got Terry McLaurin, Jaden Reed, Joe Mixon, Anthony Richardson, Hollywood Brown, Calvin Ridley, Kenneth Walker.
I think
So
I'm
at that
taking
point,
Pitts.
yeah, that's
think I'm taking
that's
Pitts.
exactly why you just proved the point. That's why he's going where he's going, because the guys after him they don't have that, wide receiver 1, RB1 upside that Pitts brings to you at the tight end position.
Yeah, none of them, all those players you name from either Mixon or the Ridleys, they don't have that wide receiver
they're
or
like
running back.
wide
one
receiver
upside.
2 at best, RB, mid RB2. You know what I mean? It's
Where
like,
in a tight end premium, Pitts could boost you up
what
there.
if he
So you-
catches 100 balls?
Yeah.
Like he could. You know what I mean?
Evan Ingram, remember a long time ago, he played for the Giants and he didn't have the greatest quarterback play. And he was, up and down. He was a yo-yo player. One week was awesome. The next week he had 0. Then he went to Jacksonville and he finally grew for Trevor Lawrence. All Kyle Pitts needs is that one missing piece and to be featured in an offense, because Jonnu Smith, my Miami Dolphin tight end, Jonnu Smith was the guy there. And we were the show week 3. I told everyone drop Kyle Pitts, and I did. I dropped Kyle Pitts in every single league, and I never picked him back up, and I was happy. I was freaking floored that I never had to roster him again in the redraft. But this year I'll get reeled back in. I know I
We
will.
always do with Kyle Pitts. If he could just convert to being a wide receiver, I think a lot of us would be a lot happier.
He's like
But
that crazy girl that you date for a year, and she was awesome that year, like that 1 year, right? She's like 1,000 yards, like she was awesome.
You
she
think
bought you
about
ice
her for the
cream and
rest of
stuff.
your life. Yeah.
And then like the next 2 years, she sucked. Like she wouldn't let you play PlayStation. She was telling you what to do. You couldn't wear T-shirts anymore. And then, but she came back in your life. She hit you a text, 12 a.m. Dave, you know what I'm talking about. She hit you the text.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Josh,
I usually
is this a
send those
personal
texts.
memory for you?
I just described Dave's life, but and he knows it too. Anyway,
You're so full of shit.
let's get to some potential guys. I know we're running late, guys. I'm Seth. I don't want to keep you.
Yeah, let's go.
It is a school night. We have players that we are avoiding. I want to know some tight ends that maybe are getting drafted a little higher. You don't have to name anyone specifically, but are there guys that you are absolutely avoiding in redraft leagues? Period.
In redraft leagues, I am hesitant on Hawkinson. Just the injury, at this point, we don't know enough in terms of like a timeline for his recovery. I've heard everything from like missing like a couple weeks to missing like half the season. And if he can play the entire season, I think even with like JJ McCarthy slinging the ball, like I think he's still going to be able to have a decent season, especially in like a tight end premium. I am extremely nervous though, without having more information around that timeline about spending what should be a relatively early pick, considering what he's done over the past couple of years. The offense changes a little bit. That adds in a little bit more anxiety. Is he going to be able to maintain, kind of what he had last year and the year before? That makes me real nervous about Hawkinson for redraft. I do like the idea of trying to get him now in Dynasty, but that wasn't your question. I kind of want to try and get an injury discount right now.
That's perfect.
In terms of redraft, he makes me too nervous, at least right now. If we get to the end of August and it's like, hey, he's running, he's cutting, he looks like he did before the injury, I don't know if Dave's shaking his head, no, that's not going to happen or what, but if that happens, like, all right, I feel a little bit better. But until then, I'm avoiding Hawkinson for redraft.
Sad, so sad. Hey guys, you guys, anything else for Seth on tight ends? Because I want to give him 7 minutes to talk about this median scoring, and I want to get into it. Anyone else want to talk about tight ends for the remaining show?
Can we talk about your tweet real quick? Because you said you were going to talk about it on the show.
What tweet?
This one.
Oh yeah, that was a long time ago. Guys, I told y'all Trey McBride was a freaking stud. I was the only person telling anyone. Maybe I wasn't the only person, but I was the only person I knew telling people he was a stud before he was drafted. That's all I got to say. I consistently find these stud players year after year. He's in all my dynasty teams in the third round, late third round. I was taking this guy, pick after pick. I still believe in him. I know it's only like a 6-8 game stretch. I think since week 10 on, he was awesome. Is he going to continue this, Seth?
I believe he's going to continue being a very good tight end. Is he going to be another, and just because I have it open right in front of me, 81 receptions for 825 yards tight end? Time will tell, especially with the changes with, Marvin Harrison Jr. coming in. They just got, who was it, Benson in the backfield to split with Connor. Does the offense change a little bit? Does a fully healthy Kyler Murray really kind of make all that disappear because he's hitting them? It's a little bit difficult to say, but he's another one of those guys that in Dynasty I'm trying to get a hold of. Laporta, McBride, whether or not it's tight end premium, those are the guys that I'm like, let me actively try and go out and get those guys. I like McBride, and he only had 3 touchdowns last year, which if we see, the people say positive regression, which is a little wonky, but like regressing to the mean, like for that many receptions and that many yards, you would expect him to have a few more touchdowns.
Yeah, I would hope so. Getting a good tight end, by the way, in Dynasty, super like in the 3rd round or 4th round of a rookie, it's so crucial. And all the people that drafted Trey McBride, you're winning right now. You really are. Okay, that's enough for tight ends. I want to get into the meat of the show. I know we're super late. If you're still listening, well, median scoring, is that what you want to talk about?
So it's not median scoring, but that's a good, if your league has median scoring, you have at least a little bit of an idea about median and hopefully where we're going with this, right? So if your league does median scoring, basically you take all the scores for the week and you say, okay, well, where's the halfway point? If you're above that halfway point, you get an extra win. If you're below that halfway point, you get an extra loss, because it helps negate I scored 235 points this week, but I played against the team that scored 236 points. Right? Like however long you've been playing fantasy, that will happen to you sooner than later. I'm sure everybody on this show has a story of that one game that they lost by a fraction of a point because of a kneel down or a fumble, or if he just caught that pass, I would have won. Or one of the best ones, we had a stat correction in a playoff game. Dude went to bed winning the game, stat correction, and he ended up losing the playoff game. One of the only times I've ever seen a stat correction was in a playoff game, right? So that's where like the median scoring for a league is like helpful, right? What I'm talking about with median points per game is giving another data point, right? I am a believer in let's use all of the tools that we have at our discretion, right? Let's use that to paint a picture, to come up with who are the guys that we're actively looking for. And so if we look at something like points per game, and I wish you had told me sooner. I was going to have a whole section for this. I would have been more prepared. But I've done a ton of different data sheets for this, right? And if you look at points per game, one of the key things that I look at is not the actual like This person was at 14.28 points per game. What I look at is, okay, great. How many games did they actually score above that? And what you'll notice is that most of the players with a high average points per game, they're actually in the worst I've ever seen is a 30%. So 30% to like mid 40% of their games of that season actually being above their average points per game. And that's because of like mathematical facts of how you calculate average. I think that part of it is one out of ease, in the sense that all you need to calculate average is what was their total points and then what was their number of games. Divide them, boom, you get points per game. Whereas to do median points per game, what you need to do is you need to actually look at all of their weekly outputs. And then by definition, the median points per game gives you that point where 50% of their games were above that mark and 50% of their games were below it. Whereas, like I said, I've looked at average points per game and then how many games above and below the average for players over the past since 2010 is how far back a lot of my data goes. And you'll see these relatively big swings. One of the key guys, think of like Joe Mixon, right? Joe Mixon is one of these guys. His average points per game is usually in a relatively good spot. But his his games over average is actually a relatively low percentage when you look at, the number of games that he's played. And so what I like to do is not just look at the median points per game, but also break it into percentiles. So when people talk about, oh, this is this guy's floor, there's not really much of a, this is what it is. It's like, yeah, his floor is like 5 points. Like that's his floor. There's not usually like a fair, like a real good mathematical point of this is what this guy's floor is. So to address that, what I do is I look at the 25th percentile. So what that means is 75% of his games from the past year or whatever data set I'm looking at were above this point, and only a quarter of his games were below it. So I look at that as like his floor, because most of the time he's going to score above that thing, that mark. And so, and I do the same thing with ceiling, right? And I go with the 75th percentile, because that's given me like, you know what? He may every once in a while hit this mark way up here, and that's awesome. But that's harder to predict, right? But 75% of his games being at this, but saying like 75% of his games get up to this point. Sorry, that's not exactly accurate. 75% of his games fall below this point, right? And 25% hit above it. That gives me like, what's the upward chance he has to hit above that point? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'm surprised, by the way, Jamar Chase isn't the person you use. Like, he's way up there, but he's got a lot of single-digit point games, and I'm sure his point per game is really high.
Yeah, if I'll pull that one up and put it on the Twitters, and just do again, like here's your kind of big group of guys that their average points per game was well below. Their number of games over average was like well below, in terms of percentage, well below that 50% mark. And a part of that is, math average, and what people go, well, yeah, it's average, it's typical, it's a normal game, it's a normal output for that person. Those all get kind of worked in together when we're speaking, right? Oh, well, what's an average amount of points I can expect from that guy? Or, yeah, I'm an average driver. If you've ever, heard that one, 80% of Americans think they're above average drivers, which when you hear it, you're like, haha, that's funny. How can that be? And it actually mathematically can be true if the worst drivers are so bad that it's bringing the average down below that point. And
Thanks,
so
Florida.
mathematically, that can be a very true statement but most of the time it's used as like we overcompensate for the things we think we do well. And then last point on this, if you've ever looked at a normal curve, remember back in middle school, normal curves, bell curves, normal distribution, it looks like a nice perfect little like semicircle. If you're using average, it's right in the middle of that. If you're using median, it's right in the middle of that for what's called the normal distribution, or something that happens kind of naturally. Fantasy points, when you look at their distribution, do not look like that. When you look at the entire spectrum of fantasy points, and when you look at an individual player's fantasy points, they have what's in stats called a fat tail, where you actually get more towards the positive side of fantasy points, right? That's your 40-point games, your 30-point games, your week winning outputs, right? You're not getting the same negative thing. Nobody's getting negative 40 fantasy points. So you have an unequal distribution. And when that happens, your average actually gets skewed away from where the majority of your points are actually at. The median is actually a better marker for where the majority of your points are actually at, rather than average, because it's getting skewed because of that fat tail and the lack of really severe negative points.
I have a question, because I'm a little bit confused, but I'm really, really, really intrigued by this. I think it makes so much sense, but I'm also really, really high right now, so I'm trying to understand what's going on. So,
on the family show,
are you suggesting all of this data that you have gotten? Do you use that personally?
Yes.
So you use it every year for like how you rank your players?
I've used it for about 3 years now. And I don't just use that. And I want to make that point clear. Like, it's not one of these things where I'm just going, all right, well, what was their median points? And like, let's redo that, right? It's using it in conjunction with other data points. But it's one of those things where, like, even for like 3 years, I've been trying to like bang the table to be like, median points, come on, somebody let's look at another perspective, right? And it's slowly starting to catch on. I see a few more people using median in their look at the data, but it is something that I use when I'm looking and trying to make a decision on, do I want to go with player X or player Y? Both of their average points per game could be the same, but I want the guy that has a higher median points per game, because they're going to give me a little bit more if they follow what they've done historically. And past experiences cannot, what's the line from all the like ambulance chasers? Past outcomes don't guarantee future outcomes, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like on all the accident lawyer commercials, right? But it is, if you look at any type of correlation data, the number one thing that's correlated is last year's thing. It's just the way the world works. And so that's where I try and incorporate that into the way I value players.
So, like, I know we're running late, but the simpler way to, like, for a simpleton like myself and like Dave and like Justin, simpletons, when I say like, oh yeah, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, they average the same amount, but Justin Jefferson ain't scoring single-digit points like Chase does. So therefore, he's got a higher floor by that definition of your data. If you
and he'll also have a higher median, most likely, right? And that's another point where, like, when you look at average points per game, most of the time people start looking at average points per game because they're so fed up with, oh, you can't just look at the end of the year totals. Don't do that. That's such a 2005 type of way of looking at players, right? Oh, it's just based on volume. Okay, but when you do average, you have to take the total and divide it by the number of games. There's no other way around it. You can't use average without looking at the total, without that being part of your analysis. Whereas like the median, yes, the total is just the sum of all your data points, but your median can be, it's not, it is still tied to total, but it's not part of like the arithmetic to get to the median the way that it is when you're doing average.
I dig it. I know Dave's into it. Dave, just to let you know, he has never in his life on this show taken an initiative to go, hey, let me ask a question. Never in his life.
That is
I want
true.
to ask a question you know why I don't? Because you cut me off too fast. I want you to know that. Because we had somebody else on a couple weeks ago, and I was gonna ask him a question, and you just kept talking. So I said, you know what? I'm good. Go ahead. But this one, I wanted to know what was going on, so I had to jump in.
Yeah, just text me. Go ahead, hey Josh, shut up. I gotta. Me and Justin been doing it the whole show. All right, like come on. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell us where we can find you, where we can get more information on this. Because I'm interested. I want to go look at the data if the data is available. So where can we find this?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at FF the At Home Dad. I have, like I said, I have this massive database that I'm working on. I'm trying to get it back up in front of people. The last one I had to take down, just in trying to update it and stuff like that. But you can find it. It'll be up on the Face Off Sports Network. You can find them on Twitter at FF Face Off. Really enjoy kind of working there. We do a ton of really fun stuff, and they give me a lot of freedom to do random things like rant about median points per game. And so, yeah, we'll get more of that up there, but by all means, hit me up on Twitter and be like, even if it's like, I don't believe you, I'd be like, all right, got you. Let's jump into that. Or if you like Dave said, hey, I have a question, hit me, throw it out there. I love being in those conversations. Like I said, I work in education. You know, I'm all about, let's ask questions, let's dig deeper, let's, have a conversation about all of it. Because that's how we learn, and that's what's fun, and that's what makes this game fun, is that conversation around it. So yeah, Twitter, Face Off, find me there.
Awesome. And you can find us at ousffpod.com. Make sure you go to our website, sign up for Super League, follow us on X. I'm not on X anymore, guys. I quit. I'm done, by the way. Yes, I did. I'm done for good. But just like I was done with Kyle Pitts, but I'm back, baby. Hey, make sure you follow Dave. Dave, where can we follow you? Dave?
At Viking Dave 18.
It doesn't matter where we can find you. Justin Barrelly, thank you so much for producing the show. Jacob, we miss you so much. Guys, next week we're talking best ball. That's right. Underdog Fantasy, all the best ball sites you can possibly play on. We do have a guest for that show as well, but Justin did not put it in the sheet. So, guys, next week we'll see you.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you watch or listen to podcasts. Follow on X and Instagram at OUSFFPOD. We'll be back next week for more ways to win your league.